Hello, my name is Jessica Pulaski and I will be graduating from Anderson University in May of 2022 with a Bachelor of Arts in Elementary Education and Spanish. My career objective is to teach before moving to the administrative side of things. So I will teach for 7 to 10 years and then move to the administrative side of education. And then eventually my plan is to open up my own charter school in the United States using all of my experience in my PhD studies. So I know that as a teacher, we hold students up to certain standards to make sure that they're hitting their mark and they are where they're supposed to be at that age. But as teachers, we also need standards to get to. We need something to hold us accountable. And so the Interstate New Teacher Assessment and Support Consortium does exactly that. It holds teachers to 10 standards, and it outlines them everything that they should be doing in order to reach that standard. So in this video today, I'm going to be talking to you about what I know, believe, and what I have done relating to all 10 of those standards. So the first standard has something to do about the aspects of development. And so I know that it is really important as a teacher to understand the development of children, and that is in order to see the normal path that each child follows, keeping in mind that there can be a little bit of going off the path, and that is really important to know when there's something significantly wrong, when something is significantly not what it should be. It's really important. The other side of that is that you know the student's zone of proximal development, so what they're able to learn, what they're actually able to learn based off of their development. And that's really useful when you're planning your lessons, just to make sure that what you're putting into your lessons is something that they actually can achieve. And I have taken the assessment class, so I know that it's really important to assess students to see where they're at and to get data on them so that you can understand how they're growing and compare that to what you know about child development. I've also taken the child development class where we learned about development from the day you're born up until 12 years old. And I also have worked at a daycare where I have taken care of infants to middle school age children, and I have gotten to see how each age grows and develops, and I was there long enough to actually see some kids grow and develop, and it was really cool to be able to apply what I'd learned in my development class to something I was actually doing. And so the next standard talks about students learning. And so I know that there are a lot of factors that go into how students learn, and it's my responsibility to understand those factors and know what to do to help students learn better based off of those factors. So some of the factors are your cultural upbringing, your past life experiences, even your parents' past life experiences can play a role in how you view learning and how you view the education system. And I know that there are preferences for learning and different student motivations. I know that how you are physically feeling can affect how you learn a lot, so your brain. And so it's really important as a teacher to know how your students prefer to learn, and you'll do that by assessment. So you keep data on your children, keep assessing them to make sure you know what's working with them, what's not working. It's also really important to know where your kids are at, and know a little bit about them in general, just to understand where they may be coming from and how their life experiences, their cultural upbringing, their preferences, all of that affects how they learn. And so I've taken, like I mentioned before, the assessment class, so I know how to assess children for that and keep the data on them. I'm actually learning about project-based learning, and I'm studying that right now in one of my classes, and that's something that is very much engaging for the children and gives them a choice and gives them different options in how to learn and how to show what they've learned as well. And I have had many many lesson plans where I've had to practice engaging the students and coming up with ways to engage them in those lessons. And so not only does how the student prefers to learn affect their actual learning, but the environment, physical and mental, affects how a student learns. So one of the most important things I believe I've learned, came from my education psychology class, was that a student who doesn't feel safe isn't going to learn. They are using their survival brain. So they're part of their brain that is controlling their fight or flight, controlling needing to survive. So if they don't feel safe in an environment, then it's going to be really hard for them to learn. And if we know that the opposite's true, that when they feel safe, they can use their quote-unquote learning brain. They can be more apt to take in what you're saying without fear, without feeling unsafe. And so, with that being said, it's really important to know the state of your learners and know that as a teacher, you control your environment. You control the learning environment. That's your responsibility. And so you need to know your learners and know your environment and how it's affecting those learners. And so, like I said, I took my education psychology class, learned all about how the brain works in schools and young children in school. I took a multicultural class that has helped me understand ways to engage, to make my environment more inviting of everybody in the classroom. And I've also had an English as a second language internship where I got to see firsthand how your learning environment and your safety, your feeling of safeness, affects how you learn. So I was working with students who they primarily spoke Spanish. They were in the process of learning English. Some students had more English knowledge than the others, but they were in a setting, an environment where everybody around them was speaking English, and very few people in that school knew how to speak Spanish. And even so, through that internship, I worked with one-on-one with a little boy who he was at the school where not a lot of even students spoke Spanish, so he didn't even have the other support. And so I really saw how that affected how he was learning and how it looked, how his assessments came out, and how if he just got some Spanish support, how that would change everything. So it was really cool to see how just changing something in the environment changed the outcome, the student success. And so yes, the teacher is involved in controlling the environment, and they're also responsible for knowing what they're teaching. So you gotta know it in order to teach it. And you also have to make sure that you're connecting that knowledge to the students' lives so that they can absorb it better. So you have to, I believe that it's important to have mastery to teach mastery, and that you need to make meaningful connections for your students. And so I have actually passed all of my licensing exams, and I have taken classes on all subjects that I will be teaching. So I've taken courses through university that have given me the content knowledge and given me the lesson planning teaching practice for those as well. And so connecting things back to students' lives also goes into the next standard, which has to do with motivating students and how essential problem solving is. So I know that our job as teachers is to create a way for our students to become motivated in what they're learning. And so one way to do this, and I believe is really important, is providing background knowledge, because not every student has the privilege to have the background knowledge that other students have. And another way to do this, I believe, is through interdisciplinary lessons. So connecting all of the subjects together can help show students how this information is going to work through all the subjects and how it works through their lives in the same way. So I took the multicultural class, like I have mentioned before, and that helped me be able to provide background knowledge to students. I've also taken the education technology class, which gave me a bunch of different ways to integrate technology into the classroom to motivate students more, especially in this day and age. It's really important to integrate those sorts of things. It can really help engage students and motivate them in the classroom. And so, assessment is so important in what we're doing in the classroom, and so we always have to be assessing. I believe that we always have to be assessing our students. It's so important to assess our students constantly from the minute that we walk into that classroom on the very first day until the minute that we leave, because that assessment is going to be what guides our teaching. It's going to show us what's working, what's not working, how the students are taking the information, like I've mentioned before, how they're learning, how they're feeling. You are constantly assessing your students, not only for the information that you've been teaching, but also for their feelings, for the environment. You're assessing so many things at once as a teacher, and so it's really important to take into account the bias you might have that might affect that assessment, and to make sure that the assessments that you are giving is free of bias. And the assessment class is coming back up. I've taken that class. It showed me many different ways to assess students. I got practice using them, I got practice making them, and when I did use them, I actually specifically used it a lot in my one-on-one reading tutoring that I did. I did it via Zoom, but I still had to be constantly assessing, observing, giving actual paper assessments. I right off the bat gave her an assessment to gauge where she was in our program, our reading program, and then every lesson I would assess how she's doing, what I needed to change the next day, maybe needed to go back over some things, and that leads me right into the next standard, which is lesson planning. So lesson planning and assessment work hand in hand. They're both very important for the classroom. You need to have lesson plans in order to succeed in teaching your students. You can use others, you can use your colleagues, you can use the internet. We have so many great sources on the internet now for lessons, and you can use those as resources as well. And we talked about in our assessment class where teachers get into groups and they plan together, they share what worked, what didn't work, they share suggestions about how they can fix certain things, they share data, they go over the data together, and it's a really good way to not only build community and trust between your colleagues, but it's also a really good way to get ideas for lesson planning. And so the biggest thing that I've learned through all of my practicum experience and my internship experience, so tutoring and my English as a second language internship, the biggest thing that I learned was that you have to be flexible in your lesson planning. You have to be able to have enough planned where you're filling all the time so that you're controlling your environment, you're controlling the behavior, the disruptions, and you have to be able to take things out, put things in, change things the next day, maybe change things right then and there, and that all stems from assessment. So assessment is so important with lesson planning. And you also, a really important thing is that you have to change your planning over time. So education is always changing. There's always new research about the best practices and best information to teach and how to teach things. And it's very important to make sure that you're not just using the same lesson plan for 20 years straight. And we've seen what that can do, how that can harm students, because that's just not the way we do it anymore. That's not the way we know that they learn best anymore. And so in your lesson plans, you need to make sure that you are giving ways to apply what the students have learned and to give them meaningful experiences. So it's really important for students to connect things back to their life. I sort of touched on this earlier, where we're building a path for them to go out into society, be functioning humans in that society, and we have to be able to make lessons important to them. We can teach kids about money, but we can teach them about money and they might not care until they hear hey, that money can buy me a cookie. You know, we make it meaningful to them. I love cookies, they love cookies. So it makes it important to them, and it makes them more motivated to know it, and they can even be more apt to apply what they've learned based off of knowing how meaningful it is to them. And so how I've done that is I have been practicing with lesson planning and building and integrating those meaningful experiences into my lesson plans. And I have a professional learning network where I follow various best practices, stay up to date on the best practices about how to do those sorts of things. And so that leads me into the next standard again, which is that it's very important as a professional to keep getting better. So these standards, you know, kind of help us get better and keep us motivated to get better. And so it's very important to stay up to date for various reasons, like giving your students the best possible chance that they have to succeed, because you're using the best research and the most up-to-date research. And so, like I just mentioned, I have my professional learning network, and I follow Edutopia, I follow Teach Culture, and I follow UNICEF, among many others, and I mainly do that through social media and reading news articles from those websites. And I do have plans to attend conferences. I know how important those can be as well. And it's just really important to keep getting better and better as you go. And that only helps the students. And so, lastly, another way to keep getting better is to use others. So use other colleagues, administrators. In this field, it's really important to work with others. You're going to be working with those people I just mentioned. You're going to be working with students. And often one that is unfortunately left out, but is very important, is that you're going to be working with parents. So I believe it is very important to keep the parents of the students involved as much as they can be. And I've learned in my classes that can be a little difficult, and I've learned in my work experience that can be a little bit difficult, just based off of different cultural upbringing, different past experiences of the parents. And I believe it's really important to keep the parents involved in what the students are doing, because it can help motivate the students. And if you bring parents in the classroom, you know, it can help the parents see what the students are doing, and it can give them a better insight to what's going on in the classroom. Just keeping them up to date on everything and keeping a really good relationship between the parents can just help the overall classroom feel, and it can help how your schoolwork goes on at home, which is a really big part of practice and repetition for a lot of things in education. And when you work with others, you can get new insights and see new viewpoints, so you can see into the students' lives in ways you wouldn't have before. You can see into how you are doing in ways you hadn't before, based off of feedback from various different people in the professional field that you're in. So some of the ways that I've done this is I've worked with people all throughout my life in sports, and all of the jobs that I've had, especially in childcare, I had to work a lot directly one-on-one with parents for that student, with private tutoring, private swim lessons. Had to work directly with the parents to see how they feel it's going, and just keeping them in the loop had really helped build a good relationship between everybody.